The lawyer's voice sliced through the oak-paneled conference room, dry and detached, as if he had read 1,000 lives being divided and mine was just another line in his day. All assets, property, and financial holdings are hereby left to my wife, Marla, and my son, Ethan, with no provision made for my daughter, Claire. The words landed like stones in my chest, each one heavier than the last, until my lungs burned as though I had forgotten how to breathe. My stepmother pressed a manicured hand to her chest in mock surprise, though the curl of her painted lips betrayed satisfaction. Ethan, my older brother, leaned back in his leather chair with a smug little grin, the kind that had infuriated me since childhood, the grin of a man who thought life existed to hand him everything. My palms were slick against the envelope in my lap, the one I had been gripping for weeks, waiting for this very moment. I let the silence stretch until I felt every eye in the room digging into me, distant cousins, old business associates, family friends who had come only to watch a spectacle. Then I rose slowly, chair scraping against the polished floor, my heartbeat drumming in my ears. "That's not the whole story," I said, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. Marla laughed, high and brittle. "Oh, Claire, don't embarrass yourself. The will is final." I laid the envelope on the table, pressing it down with my palm. "Actually," I said, letting my eyes move from her to Ethan and finally to the lawyer, "Dad left me something you don't know about. And trust me, you're going to wish you had." Gasps fluttered across the room like startled birds. Ethan scoffed. "What are you talking about?" "You were cut out because you never mattered to him." My throat tightened, but I smiled, cold, deliberate. "Funny," I said, sliding out a notarized letter, a USB drive, and a certified deed, because Dad seemed to think otherwise. The lawyer frowned, curiosity piqued, and took the deed first. His brow furrowed as he read aloud, "Transfer on death deed, beneficiary, Claire Eleanor Winters." He looked up, blinking. "This conveys the lake house directly to Claire upon Mr. Winters' death. This document supersedes the will." The room erupted. Marla's laugh cracked into a shriek. "That's impossible. He would never," but the lawyer cut her off gently. "It's very possible. Non-probate transfers bypass wills." Ethan slammed his fist against the table. "Forgery," he spat. But then I slid the USB drive across the wood, my fingers trembling with controlled rage. "Dad recorded this for moments like today," I said. The screen flickered to life, and my father appeared, gaunt but defiant in a hospital gown, eyes burning with the stubbornness I'd inherited from him. "If you're watching this," he rasped, "then my daughter Claire has had to fight harder than she ever should have. I cut her out of the will because I gave her what I wanted her to have outside of it, where Marla and Ethan couldn't twist or bully it away. The lake house is hers. The Class B company shares are in the Raven Trust under her stewardship. If you contest this, no, I kept ledgers. Dates. Amounts. Every favor I forgave. And none of it will look kind in court." The room froze. Even the air felt stunned, and for a moment, all I could hear was the echo of my father's voice ringing like judgment. Long before the lawyer read those words, before the video of my father flickered to life, before I laid down the envelope that cracked my stepmother's mask, I had already been erased 100 different ways. My family story wasn't written in love, it was written in hierarchy, and at the very top sat my brother Ethan, the golden child, the heir apparent, the one who could do no wrong. And somewhere near the bottom, almost invisible, was me. When I was little, I thought it was just the natural order of things, like the sun rising or the mailman coming at 11:15. Ethan was older, louder, easier to brag about. Every time he made a soccer goal, my father would slap his back, grin wide, and say, "That's my boy." When I came home with straight A's, my stepmother Marla would murmur, "Well, of course Claire did. She has nothing else going for her." The words stung more than I ever admitted, not because they were true, but because after a while my father stopped correcting her. I was 12 when Dad married Marla, and I remember standing in the pews at their wedding, tugging uncomfortably at my frilly dress, wondering if this woman with the sharp smile would ever see me as more than a nuisance. She never did. To her, I was a reminder of the life Dad had before her, the life she couldn't control. And Ethan, he loved her adoration. She treated him like a little prince, and he soaked it up, learning fast that Claire was the scapegoat, the one they could blame when things went wrong. I'll never forget the night Ethan crashed Dad's old convertible into a lamppost. He staggered home smelling of beer, eyes wide with fear. Marla's first words weren't, "Are you okay?" They were, "We'll tell your father Claire took it without asking." And they did. I was grounded for a month, even though I hadn't touched the car. I sat in my room listening to Ethan sneak pizza up the stairs, listening to my father's disappointment outside my door, thinking, maybe if I just work harder, maybe if I'm just quieter, he'll see me. But the truth was, he rarely looked my way unless it was through the lens of obligation. School conferences? Marla, can you handle Claire's? Birthdays? We'll do something small. She doesn't care about fuss. Ethan's 16th birthday had a live band and a rented tent in the backyard. My 16th was a cake from the grocery store that tasted like cardboard. Still, I tried. God, did I try. I studied harder, I helped more, I kept the peace. And in those rare quiet moments, when it was just me and Dad on the dock at the lake house, fishing lines in the water, the sun low on the horizon, I caught glimpses of something softer. He would tell me stories about the company, about risks he took, about how he built everything from nothing. Sometimes he would glance at me and say, "You've got my brain, Claire. Don't waste it." But the second we went back inside, it was like he had to put the mask back on, the one Marla demanded he wear. By the time I was 18, I had already made peace with being the ghost in my own family. Invisible unless they needed someone to blame. Unseen unless they wanted someone to compare Ethan to. But ghosts notice things. Ghosts remember. Ghosts collect secrets. And one day, one of those secrets would change everything. It started the summer I turned 19, the first summer I didn't come home after freshman year. I stayed in the dorms, worked double shifts at a diner, saved every dime because the thought of walking back into that red brick house made my stomach knot. But Dad called me one evening, his voice lower, slower than I remembered, like the weight of something unsaid pressed on him. "Claire," he began, "come to the lake house this weekend." Alone. His tone was sharp enough that I packed a bag without argument. When I arrived, he was sitting on the porch, not with his usual bourbon, but with a folder in his lap. He didn't look like the untouchable man who ran a company. He looked like someone rehearsing words he didn't want to say. "I made mistakes with you," he admitted, eyes fixed on the lake. My breath caught because I had never heard him say anything like that, not once. Marla, she has a way of pulling focus. And Ethan, he's loud, he demands. You were quiet." I thought quiet meant fine. I wanted to scream that I wasn't fine, that I had been screaming inside for years, but I stayed silent. He turned, finally looking at me, and for a second I saw regret etched into the lines around his eyes. "You've got my head, Claire. You see details others miss. And I know what happens when I'm gone. Marla will push, Ethan will squander. That's why I've started, making arrangements." He tapped the folder. Inside were copies of documents I didn't yet understand, deeds, trust forms, amendments to shareholder agreements. "This isn't official yet," he said, "but it will be. Some things won't go through the will. Safer that way. I need you to trust me to keep quiet." My throat went dry. "Why me?" I asked, half disbelieving. He gave a humorless laugh, "Because you're the only one I trust not to bleed me dry." That night we walked the dock in silence, and I thought maybe, just maybe, he saw me. But back at the house, Marla called, shrill and demanding, asking why he'd gone to the lake without telling her. He gave me a look that said, "This is why." Over the next 2 years, whenever we met alone, he slipped me breadcrumbs. "A notarized letter here. A copy of a ledger there. Keep these safe," he'd murmur. "If they ever try to shut you out, these will open the door." I didn't tell a soul. Not my friends, not a professor, not even Grandma, who always suspected Marla's games. It was a secret seed, planted deep, watered with every snide comment my stepmother made, every condescending smirk from Ethan. By the time Dad got sick, by the time the hospital visits started piling up, by the time Marla positioned herself like a queen at his bedside, I already knew there was more than the will. I already knew Dad had hidden something away from me. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was just how much it would cost to reveal it. The last year of my father's life was a theater of control, and Marla was the director. She made the hospital room her throne, arranging flowers in expensive vases, dictating visiting hours like a queen ruling over courtiers. Nurses whispered about her sharp tongue, about the way she'd dismiss them with a flick of her hand. Ethan played the dutiful son, striding in with his suit jacket still on, speaking loudly about business updates as though Dad's failing lungs were a quarterly report. I usually came in the evenings after classes or shifts when the fluorescent lights hummed and the hallways were quieter. Dad would wave everyone else out if he could, his hand trembling but his stare still iron. Sit, he'd rasp, and I'd perch on the chair by his bed. He didn't waste breath on pleasantries. "They want me to sign it," he whispered one night, eyes darting to the manila folder Ethan had left on the side table. I picked it up and flipped through. Durable power of attorney, granting Ethan full control of assets and decisions. My stomach dropped. "He said it's just paperwork to help while you're here," I muttered, though I didn't believe it. Dad's hand closed over mine, weak but insistent. "It's a leash. Don't let them tighten it." 2 nights later, I walked in to find Ethan leaning over the bed, pen in hand, coaxing Dad's fingers toward the signature line. Marla hovered like a hawk, murmuring, "It'll make things easier, darling. You don't need the stress." Dad looked up, saw me in the doorway, and his eyes hardened. "Out," he croaked, but it wasn't aimed at me, it was for them. Ethan blanched, sputtered, "Dad, you're confused, out." Dad barked again, his voice breaking but clear enough to shake the walls. They left, Marla shooting me daggers as she swept past. When the room fell silent, Dad pressed the folder into my hands. "Keep it. Burn it." "I don't care. But don't let them use it." I tucked it into my bag without question. That night he pulled out his phone, shaky fingers scrolling. "We're recording something," he muttered. "They'll fight over every scrap. I need my voice on record." He propped the phone against a water jug and hit record. His voice wavered, but the words were sharp. "If they say I wasn't of sound mind, let this prove otherwise. If they try to steal from Claire, let this stop them. I know what they think of her. They're wrong." The next day he called in his lawyer quietly, behind Marla's back. Papers shuffled, signatures scratched out. He handed me a flash drive, pressing it into my palm like a relic. "Don't open it unless you have to. But when you do, don't flinch." His eyes, fever bright, locked on mine. "Promise me." My throat closed. "I promise." In those last weeks, Marla tightened her grip, trying to control every visitor, every nurse, every whisper. But Dad, even with failing lungs, still had the sharpness of a man who built an empire from dust. He played along when he had to, nodding at her fussing, pretending to sleep when she ranted, saving his strength for the few hours when it was just him and me. And in those hours, he passed me everything she didn't know existed, ledgers of loans forgiven, contracts with Ethan's signature in the wrong places, and one final letter with his unmistakable block handwriting, to Claire. "This is the truth. Keep it safe. Use it if they try to erase you." When he died, Marla wept like a widow in an opera. Ethan played the grieving son for cameras, and I stood still at the graveside, the weight of the flash drive heavy in my pocket. They thought I was empty-handed. They thought cutting me out of the will was the end of my story. But Dad had already made his last moves, and the game wasn't theirs to win anymore. The day of the will reading felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a performance staged for an unwilling audience. The lawyer's office was one of those old downtown spaces with crown molding and shelves that sagged under the weight of leather-bound volumes no one had opened in decades. The air smelled of dust and polished wood, the kind of air that clings to secrets. The guests filed in one by one, each carrying their own expectations. My stepmother, Marla, arrived first, dressed head to toe in black silk, her pearl necklace gleaming like a badge of victory. She moved as if she owned the room already, heels clicking against the floor like a metronome. She placed herself at the head of the conference table, not even pretending to defer to the lawyer. She didn't have to say it, her posture screamed it. This is mine now. Ethan strolled in 10 minutes later, phone in hand, tapping out texts even as condolences floated his way. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit, the kind he couldn't afford without Dad's money, but his tie was crooked, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't even notice. He collapsed into a chair beside Marla, leaning back with the lazy confidence of a man who had been handed every advantage since birth. He didn't look at me once, as though I were already a ghost in the room. Aunt Lydia came next, Dad's older sister, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She had never liked Marla and wasn't shy about it. She gave me a soft squeeze of the hand as she passed and whispered, "Be strong." She didn't know what I carried in my bag. A few cousins I hadn't seen in years drifted in, curious more than anything, like spectators who came for the drama. Even two of Dad's business partners showed up, silent men in dark suits, eyes sharp. The tension was a living thing, buzzing through the air as the lawyer, Mr. Carlyle, a thin man with tired eyes, opened a folder and cleared his throat. We all knew what was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud was different. His voice was steady, but his eyes flicked up every so often, perhaps gauging the explosion he knew was inevitable. The last will and testament of Richard Winters, he began, bequeaths all assets, property, and financial holdings to his wife, Marla Winters, and his son, Ethan Winters. No provision is made for his daughter, Claire Winters. The words dropped like stones into a pond, the ripples spreading instantly. A gasp escaped Aunt Lydia's lips. The cousins exchanged uneasy glances. The business partners looked down at their hands. But Marla, oh Marla, she smiled. Not the sympathetic widow's smile she'd rehearsed for months, but a sharp, satisfied smirk. She placed her manicured hand over Ethan's and whispered something that made him chuckle. My blood boiled. I sat perfectly still, though every muscle in my body wanted to scream, to shout, to ask how many times a daughter has to be erased before she vanishes completely. But instead, I reached into my bag, fingers brushing against the envelope I'd carried for weeks. The envelope Dad had pressed into my hand when he was too weak to stand, but still strong enough to defy them. I let the silence drag on until the room seemed to hold its breath. Then I rose, slowly, deliberately, the legs of my chair scraping against the hardwood. Every eye turned to me, most filled with pity, some with annoyance. Marla arched an eyebrow. Ethan rolled his eyes. That's not the whole story, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Marla laughed, brittle and mocking. Oh, Claire, don't embarrass yourself. The will is final. I placed the envelope on the table with a soft thud. Actually, I said, looking from her to Ethan to the lawyer, Dad left me something you don't know about. And trust me, you're going to wish you had. Gasps rippled through the room. Ethan snorted. What are you talking about? You were cut out because you never mattered to him. I smiled then, not warmly, not kindly, but with the cold clarity of someone holding a loaded weapon in plain sight. Funny, I said, sliding out a notarized letter, a USB drive, and a certified deed, because Dad seemed to think otherwise. Mr. Carlyle blinked, curiosity sparking. He took the deed first, his brow furrowing as he read. Transfer on death deed beneficiary, Claire Eleanor Winters. His eyes lifted to the room. This conveys the lake house directly to Claire upon Mr. Winters' death. This document supersedes the will. The room erupted like a bomb had gone off. Marla's smile snapped into a snarl. That's impossible. He would never, but Carlyle shook his head. It's very possible. Non-probate transfers bypass wills. Ethan slammed his fist against the table so hard the pens rattled. Forgery, he spat. And then, with hands that no longer trembled, I slid the USB drive across the polished wood. Dad recorded this for moments like today, I said. The lawyer plugged it in. The screen flickered, and my father appeared, gaunt but unbroken, his voice rough but steady. If you're watching this, it means people I knew would fight over what I left. So I've made sure my daughter, Claire, gets what I wanted her to have. The lake house is hers. The Class B shares of the company are in the Raven Trust, under her stewardship. If you contest this, know I kept ledgers, dates, amounts, debts forgiven. None of it will look kind in court. The silence afterward was deafening. And in that silence, for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. For a long moment, the room was silent, so silent I could hear the faint hum of the old fluorescent light above us. Then Marla exploded. She leapt to her feet, pearls jangling against her throat, face flushed and angry crimson. "This is a lie," she screeched, jabbing a manicured finger at me. She manipulated him, poisoned his mind in those last weeks. She always wanted to tear this family apart. Ethan joined in like the dutiful soldier he pretended to be. He slammed both fists on the table so hard the coffee cups rattled. "You think you're clever, Claire? You think a piece of paper and some shaky video make you more important than me? I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who took care of Dad, not you." His voice cracked on the last words, the sound of desperation disguised as rage. Aunt Lydia cut in, sharp as a blade. "You stayed, Ethan, because you had nowhere else to go. And we all know Marla wouldn't let Claire through the front door half the time." Gasps rippled through the room. A few cousins nodded, murmuring agreement. Even one of Dad's business partners leaned forward and muttered, "We all saw it." Marla whipped around, eyes wild. "Lies. All of you. Richard loved me. He trusted me. He would never have." Her voice faltered as the lawyer calmly held up the notarized letter. "Mrs. Winters," Carlyle said, his tone firm but polite, "your husband's handwriting, witnessed and sealed. This is his voice. His wishes are very clear." I watched her tremble, watched Ethan sink back in his chair, cheeks blotchy, jaw tight, the smirk long gone. The facade was crumbling in front of everyone, cousins, partners, friends. The people they had spent years impressing were watching their ugliness leak out like poison into the air. And then, like a nail in the coffin, the video replayed on loop. Dad's voice rang again. "If you contest this, I left ledgers. Debts, amounts, favors forgiven. None of it will look kind in court." Everyone stared at Marla and Ethan now, not me. They shifted uncomfortably under the weight of those words, the weight of judgment they couldn't escape. Marla tried one last time, her voice cracking into hysteria. "This is theft. This is betrayal. This is," I stood, calm as stone. "No, Marla. This is justice. For every birthday you ignored. For every lie you let Ethan pin on me. For every time you tried to erase me from my father's life. You lost because Dad finally saw the truth." The lawyer closed the folder, his voice final. "The lake house belongs to Claire. The Raven Trust is valid. There's nothing further to contest today." The room shifted. Cousins avoided Marla's gaze. Aunt Lydia actually smiled, small and sharp. The business partners shook my hand on their way out, muttering, "Your father chose wisely." And as I stood there, tall for the first time in years, Marla collapsed back into her chair, mascara streaking her cheeks, Ethan staring at the table like a child caught stealing candy. In that moment, the weight of invisibility lifted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the ghost of the Winters family, I was the one holding the keys. I could almost hear Dad whispering from the dock of the lake house, "Don't waste it, Claire." So tell me, if your father cut you out of his will but left you the power to turn the tables, would you walk away quietly, or would you stand in the middle of that room, let them unravel and finally claim what was yours?